Hey everybody, waiting for nextyear.com podcast. Before I get into the Cavaliers talk, I just want to tell you not about Patreon. I'm not doing that today. Just never forget the Warriors blew a 3-1 lead. No matter whatever happens after that, the Warriors blew a 3-1 lead. Nothing they can do, no free agent they can sign can ever take that away. The Warriors blew a 3-1 lead. The Cavaliers were champions. The Warriors blew a 3-1 lead. 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 Hey everybody, waiting for nextyear.com podcast. I'm your host Craig Lindell, and the NBA Finals are complete. The Cavaliers get knocked out in a pretty thrilling game. They lose the series 4-1 after finally getting over the top in Game 4. They made it a game in Game 5, but ultimately lose. And we're left to kind of figure out what it all means. You know, we're trying to figure out what it means for us as Cavs fans, what it means for the NBA at large. Although I'm sure some of you don't care so much about that. But let's talk about a couple things. As we lick our wounds, as they were. I don't know about the rest of you. I'm obviously very disappointed. Disappointed that the Cavaliers didn't win at all. You know, you only get so many chances to get so close. And the Cavaliers got really, really damn close. The NBA Finals. The Cavaliers entered the NBA Finals with a 12-1 record. You know, they came up against a team that had a 12-0 record. So when you really look at the margin for error for either team on the way in, you know, it was obviously very, very big. I mean, the Cavaliers smoked the East. And I know it didn't always feel like it. It never feels like it from wire to wire. But when you look back on the whole thing and you see what their record was entering the finals, and you see what Golden State's record was entering the finals, despite the fact that they did have a one-game scare before Kawhi, when Kawhi Leonard got hurt, and these two juggernauts enter, and the Warriors really just stuck it to the Cavaliers in those first two games, and the Cavs missed their chance to hold home court in Game 3, and get beat, really, really close at the end. They absolutely plaster the Warriors in Game 4. I know people's nerves were flying high, even as the Cavaliers had giant leads through much of Game 4. But the Cavaliers proved that they can play with the Warriors. Not this year, not over the course of 5 complete games, but it's in them. The talent is in them on this team, not when Tristan Thompson isn't showing up, and not when J.R. Smith can't hit anything from the outside, and not when Kyle Korver is missing wide open threes. And this is not me naming scapegoats. These are guys that I believe in, that I think the Cavaliers would be well served to keep going forward to help them compete with these same Warriors next year. The point is that sometimes it's about overall team quality, like when the Spurs crushed the Cavaliers in 2007. That was a huge, huge talent disparity. And yes, there's a talent disparity between these Golden State Warriors and our Cleveland Cavaliers. They're a little bit better. I think anybody who's really thinking about it knows that LeBron's probably your first pick, but your next 2 or 3 are coming from Golden State. Definitely 2, maybe 3. Just depends on how you decide to pick. So they definitely have a more top-heavier, a slight advantage on the talent. From a talent perspective, but not anywhere near what we've seen in the past when the Cavaliers LeBron carried arguably the worst NBA Finals team into the finals in 2007. That's not the case. This Cavaliers team, including Kyle Korver, yes, including even Deron Williams, potentially, should he decide to take a giant veteran minimum kind of a deal to stay in Cleveland. These are guys who can help them going forward. I mean, the Cavaliers used to have Sean Livingston. It was in the dark years before LeBron came back, but he's quote unquote a key to a championship team. You're always going to need guys like that. And I'm not scapegoating Kyle Korver and Darren Williams or any of those guys. I think those guys in another year, when they're a little bit hotter or maybe with a little more familiar, could contribute to a Cavaliers team that would beat the Warriors in the finals. But the Warriors played really, really well. The Cavaliers, not so much. Some of that had to do with the Warriors, and some of that had to do with the Cavaliers. The Cavaliers just didn't show up till game 3, and then they didn't finish. But it's just hard to argue. It's hard to argue. You know, all of game 5, Kevin Durant, even when he was defended well, you know, even when the Cavaliers got a switch that wasn't to their advantage, I thought that they played pretty good defense. I thought they stayed at home. He just happens to be an unstoppable mid-range jump shooter most of the time, and he was tonight. And so the Cavaliers go down. And it's tough. It's tough, but I'm not devastated. I think you bring this team back. I think you continue to build this team, assuming David Griffin is back. He's the one who continues to build this team and put the pieces together. I think Ty Lue can coach better. And again, I like Ty Lue. I think he's the right coach for this team. I think that he left some things, some repetitions on the floor. I think he left some reps on the table this series. I thought he didn't stop momentum with timeouts the right way. I thought some of his lineups were a little bit goofy, but I don't think there was a magical lineup that if Ty Lue had just done this, the Cavaliers would have won. Like, I just don't think that's the case. So it's what happens. You play games. You put your best team out there, and sometimes they've got it, sometimes they don't. And this time the Warriors had more than the Cavaliers. That's just the way it goes. There's some other things that I noticed about this series and that I think are really important to note, but it's just something I want to note amongst us friends. And you'll see why in a second. But first, let me open this blah, blah, blah IPA, because I think, you know, of all nights, I've probably earned myself a post-game beer here. One of the things that I think is really interesting is that much like when the Miami Heat finally won a championship, and I was still bitter Cleveland fan at that time, you know, in my mind, it didn't really prove anything, because it just proved that the favorite who was supposed to win, who put together a super team, won the thing. And yeah, you could say the same thing about the Cavaliers. You're warping their way through the East, and I would agree. I mean, I'm not a hypocrite. I get it. But at the same time, I think the narrative on the Warriors is really kind of obvious. It just, these are the narratives that Cavaliers best not be the ones to talk about. Let other people talk about them. So the Warriors winning the championship, impressive? I don't think so. But I'm just a bitter Cavs fan, so I'm going to let somebody else say it. But I think the narrative's pretty obvious. Another narrative that I think is pretty obvious, I think Steph Curry is kind of a garbage person. The way he carries himself, the way he carried himself as time was expiring, as the clock was running out, the way he took a dump, you know, pretended to take a dump on the Cavaliers floor. I think he revealed himself to be kind of a petty, childish, garbage kind of a guy. I don't actually feel that way about Draymond Green, but back to the Steph thing, I shouldn't be the one to say it. Like, I really think it's obvious, but I'll let somebody else say it. You know, let somebody who's not a Cavaliers fan, who's faced this team 3 years in a row in the NBA Finals, let them say it. And I would advise other Cavaliers fans to do the same. Back to well, before we get to Draymond Green, let's talk about Kevin Durant. You know, I think the narrative on Kevin Durant is pretty obvious too. He's not a bad guy. I don't hate him, but I'm also not overly impressed by his accomplishments, no matter how great his stats were. He was amazing. He was incredible. He was unstoppable in the mid-range at the end of Game 5. He was the deciding factor, if you ask me, which probably contributes to my Steph Curry narrative a little bit too. But what did Kevin Durant prove? Did he prove the doubters wrong? Did he exact revenge for not winning in the finals the first time? What did he actually prove by winning the NBA Finals by joining a team that won 73 regular season games and made the finals a year before? He's the champ. He's a champ. He gets the ring. But I mean, if we're really looking at it in terms of history and redefining the sport and everything else, like, it's not an asterisk, but I think the narrative's pretty obvious. It's not overcoming adversity. They built a hell of a team. And so I think that narrative's out there. But again, Cavaliers fans, we just kind of need to let other people come to that conclusion. For us, if we start screaming about it, it's just sour grapes. And I don't feel like sour grapes. The Cavaliers have one of the greatest basketball teams ever assembled with one of the greatest basketball players to ever play the game. And they put a team together by making a bunch of trades, but I mean, they put together a super team all on their own because they happened to be fortunate enough that LeBron James wanted to come back. Like, it didn't take a certain amount of managerial or ownership talent to build this Cavaliers team. It did on the fringes. David Griffin did a great job building this Cavaliers team, but how big of an accomplishment is it when the greatest player of a generation just happened to want to come back here, happened to get drafted here and then happened to want to come back here? Good for us, but let's not pretend like it's some, ginormous accomplishment that the entire universe should recognize, and I feel the same way about Durant. It's cool for him and cool for his fans, but I mean, what did he prove in terms of making history? What did they prove? They proved that it was a hell of a fortunate salary cap situation that enabled a team that good at that level of its development to have room to bring that guy on. So, but again, I'm not screaming and yelling about it because from us it's just sour grapes. But I think these things stand. I think everybody kind of sees them, especially the Curry stuff. Like I'm sure Curry's got a huge. Obviously, he's got a huge fan base and a huge amount of diehards. But we know who that guy is. We know exactly who that guy is, and I think everybody else sees who he is too. And I don't think it's just my bitter Cavs glasses that I'm wearing when I say that. So, none of this is really going to make you feel better. By the way, I know that. I'm doing a lot of rationalizing, I guess, and painting a lot of narratives and talking about that kind of stuff, the stuff that doesn't really matter. The fact is the Cavaliers lost the NBA Finals 4-1. The fact is that they wasted an opportunity. You only get so many opportunities. LeBron's 32 years old, and professional sports is a fickle thing. The Cavaliers and Warriors both need to know that. Steph Curry is 29 now. He's no longer 25 or 26. He's not in the prime of his prime. And certainly LeBron James, although he's playing like it, you just never know when that he's going to take a half step back or a quarter step back. But it's coming. It comes for everybody. Time comes for everybody, and maybe LeBron will have another 4 years. But even then, it's not like Kyrie Irving, who's still 24. And so that's where it sits. I don't really have much of a conclusion tonight. I just needed to crack the mic and talk to everybody, and I hope that everybody's hanging in there. It was a hell of a run, man. First time in my lifetime where my team was the champion for a calendar year. And LeBron and Kevin Love brought the belt home. Kyrie Irving and crew earned the rings, and we got to live, as champions, having the championship belt for an entire year, and then to follow it up with another attempt at the NBA Finals is just really cool. It's just great. And I know it hurts. I know it sucks to lose, but I just don't want to forget where we've been. I want to make sure we remember where we've been, and also that we can go back again next year as fans. We can go back and watch LeBron and company go straight back to the finals next year, and hopefully they'll be playing a little bit better or hit Golden State in the mouth first, if Golden State's even the one who makes it. You just never know. And so never knowing is part of the reason why it feels like a missed opportunity, and why you might be so disappointed. But if you're never going to enjoy the ride, you might as well jump off and never take in any part of it to begin with. And so I want to make sure, even while we're in the miserable part of the moment, that I appreciate the ride. I appreciate the fact that the Cavaliers were champs for a year. They delivered on that. And so they didn't win back-to-back. That's I'm trying to put it in the bigger perspective, even if it hurts right now in the moment. So that's all I got. Hopefully we get some guests on here. I am kind of happy, one way or another. I'm happy that the NBA Finals are over. It was, it's been a grind. The playoffs are a grind. The NBA season was a total grind. It's been since October? Since October. And here we are 7-8 months later in June. And it's finally wrapped up. The Cavaliers had a hell of a year. And I know that when you're built like the Cavaliers and LeBron James on that team, LeBron James is on your team, that it's championship or bust. But it still was a hell of a run. So hope you're well. Hope you're hanging in there. Here's to doing it again next year and hopefully coming out on top. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. It's been the waitingfornextyear.com podcast.